So, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's like a certain expectation of precision, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You expect things to be very clear-cut.
Exactly. I mean, you break your arm, the x-ray shows a jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is, broken.
Right. It's clean, it's visible, it's categorized.
But if you step into the world of emergency gastroenterology, that neat precision just completely collides with sheer unpredictable chaos.
Oh, without a doubt.
I'm talking about what happens when someone swallows something they absolutely should not have, and a medical team has to literally go into the human digestive tract and pull it back out.
Which is incredibly complex
Yep.
because the human digestive tract is not, some passive open pipe.
Right.
It is this wet, highly muscular, constantly moving environment. So attempting to retrieve a foreign object from that space is, well, it's the absolute definition of high-stakes biomechanical problem solving.
Welcome to Today's Deep Dive. We are exploring a uniquely terrifying but honestly incredibly fascinating scenario for you today. It really is fascinating.
Our mission here is to break down the highly precise world of foreign body removal. We're going to examine the strict rules of when doctors actually panic, the ingenious physics of the tools they rely on, and the literal anatomical gymnastics required to pull it all off safely.
And we're pulling our insights today from a really phenomenal primary source.
Yes, we are.
It's an instructional medical video from the YouTube channel Gatu Mukala S. Raju, specifically a video titled HCC 1475-34A-FB Removal Rat Tooth Forceps.
Quite a title.
It is, but it serves as a literal masterclass for medical professionals on how to handle these exact emergencies.
It really is a masterclass. And, as we get into this, I want you to just imagine playing the claw machine game at an arcade.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. You know the mechanics, you drop the claw, you hope for the best. But instead of a stuffed animal, the prize you were trying to grab is like an open safety pin.
Wow.
And the machine itself, that's a human throat. That visualization perfectly captures the fundamental mechanical nightmare these doctors are facing. I mean, they're operating from a distance, relying almost entirely on the tactile feedback of a tool on a wire.
Essentially blind.
Completely blind, except for the tiny camera on the endoscope.
So if a patient comes into the emergency room and says they swallowed something bizarre, the very first problem isn't actually figuring out how to get it out.
No, not at all.
The immediate problem is deciding if they even need to rush. Because not every swallowed object is a drop-everything emergency, right?
Exactly. You have to triage.
Right, and the source material outlines very strict, what I'd call danger dimensions. We're talking about objects wider than 2.5 centimeters or objects longer than 6 centimeters.
And those numbers are completely immovable boundaries.
Really? No wiggle room?
None. In a crisis, you don't want a medical team standing around a light board debating whether an object looks like it might pass naturally. Those precise millimeter measurements represent the literal physical limits of human anatomy.
Okay, I understand needing a rule of thumb, but let's unpack this. Why exactly 6 centimeters? Like, what specifically happens at 6.1 centimeters that makes it an anatomical impossibility?
Well, it really comes down to the geometry of the human gut. The stomach acts like a large holding tank, but the exit door, which is a muscular valve called the pyloric sphincter, is very tight.
Yeah.
So if an object is wider than 2.5 centimeters, it simply cannot physically squeeze through that valve. It's like trying to push a golf ball through a garden hose.
Ouch. Yeah, that paints a picture.
But let's say a long, thin object manages to slip through the stomach. The immediate next structure is the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine.
And the duodenum isn't just a straight drop, right?
Far from it. The duodenum wraps around the pancreas in this very tight, rigid, C-shaped curve known as the duodenal sweep.
The duodenal sweep, okay.
Yeah. So a stiff object longer than 6 centimeters acts like a rigid pole trying to navigate a tight spiral staircase.
Oh.
It physically cannot make the turn. It will just jam into the intestinal wall, causing an obstruction or, even worse, perforating the bowel. That is exactly why 6 centimeters triggers an immediate surgical intervention.
That structural reality makes total sense. Now, beyond just dimensions, the source highlights specific objects that trigger an instant emergency. Sharp objects are obvious. But the video specifically singles out button batteries stuck in the esophagus.
Yes.
You know, those tiny, flat silver batteries you put in a watch or like a car key fob.
Right. And when a button battery gets lodged in the esophagus, it is not merely a physical blockage. It is a severe chemical emergency.
See, this is where I need to push back a little.
Okay.
A button battery is a completely smooth, round, blunt disc. It doesn't have sharp edges. So if it's just sitting there, why is it such an immediate ticking clock? What is actually happening to the tissue?
The danger is purely chemical and electrical. The esophagus is a very moist environment lined with tissue and coated in saliva. When a button battery gets stuck, it presses directly against that moist mucosal wall. And the saliva acts as a conductive bridge between the two poles of the battery, completing an electrical circuit.
Wait, so the battery is actively discharging current into the person's throat?
It is actively
Right.
generating an electrical current, yes. And that current splits the water molecules in the saliva, leading to a rapid accumulation of hydroxide ions at the negative pole,
Okay.
which creates sodium hydroxide, which is essentially lye.
Wait, really? Lie?
Yes, lye. The local environment spikes to a highly alkaline pH, often reaching 12 or 13, and within just 2 hours, that chemical reaction will literally liquefy the esophageal tissue.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it burns a hole straight through the wall and into the surrounding vital structures.
That is horrifying. I mean, it's not just sitting there, it's actively melting the anatomy.
Which is why triage is so critical here. Recognizing a button battery on an X-ray means bypassing observation entirely and moving straight to extraction to stop the chemical burn.
Wow. Okay, so there is one more emergency indicator mentioned in the triage phase of the source, and it's brilliant in its simplicity. It's called the saliva test.
Ah, yes.
If a patient comes in and they cannot even swallow their own saliva, the medical team knows they have a massive problem.
The saliva test is it's the ultimate diagnostic tool for a complete obstruction.
I like to think of the esophagus like a highway.
Okay.
If there's a bad accident, traffic stops, but you might still see, like, a motorcycle weave its way through the wreckage.
Right.
But if the pileup is so severe that not even the smallest, most agile vehicle, in this case your own natural saliva, can squeeze by, you know the highway is completely blocked.
That's a great way to look at it. The medical term for the open space inside the esophageal tube is the lumen. So when a patient fails the saliva test, it means the foreign body has completely occluded the lumen.
Completely blocked it.
Exactly. The source notes this frequently happens with food bolus obstructions,
Yeah.
essentially a large, poorly chewed mass of meat.
Right, like swallowing a huge piece of steak.
Yeah. And when the lumen is blocked completely, saliva pools in the throat, risking aspiration into the lungs, which makes it an emergent extraction.
So the triage phase concludes. We have a 6-centimeter object wedged in the stomach, or a button battery generating lye in the throat, or a complete food blockage. The decision is made. We are going in.
We're going in.
Which transitions us from the diagnosis of the problem directly to the mechanics of the solution. How do you grab a slippery object inside a wet, moving tube?
Tool selection at this stage dictates whether the procedure succeeds or fails catastrophically. You're operating through an endoscope, which is a long, flexible tube with a camera, and the tools you pass down through that scope have to do all the mechanical work.
And the instructional video spends significant time warning doctors against a very specific trap using biopsy forceps for extraction.
Biopsy forceps are ubiquitous in gastroenterology. They are always on hand, but they feature a tiny cup configuration at the very end of the jaws.
Yeah, the video is incredibly blunt about this. It essentially tells doctors that trying to use those little cups to pull out a foreign body will just result in profound frustration. Like, do not waste the time.
We have to look at the mechanics of the tool itself. Biopsy forceps are designed to bite into soft tissue and pinch off a tiny, superficial sample for the lab.
Right.
Grabbing a smooth, heavy coin with biopsy cups is mechanically equivalent to trying to pick up a wet marble using a pair of flat metal tweezers.
That sounds impossible.
It basically is. There is no texture for the tool to bite into. The cups will simply slide off the object the moment any pulling force is applied.
Which introduces the absolute hero of this scenario, the rat tooth forceps.
The name is aggressively descriptive, but perfectly accurate. Instead of smooth cups, the jaws of these forceps feature interlocking metal teeth that literally resemble a rodent's incisors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're engineered specifically to bite into or securely clamp down on an object.
And it isn't just one standard tool either. The variations are wild. You can select short jaws or long jaws. You can select jaws with serrated edges, like little metal grooves along the side for extra friction, or jaws without serrations.
Exactly.
The doctor has to analyze the object and pick the exact correct variation to match the geometry of the foreign body.
Because treating a swallowed safety pin mechanically the same as a swallowed coin will just lead to failure.
But here is where the source material completely threw me.
Oh.
Yeah, the video strongly advises the doctor to do a practice run before ever inserting the endoscope into the patient.
Yes, they recommend a physical dry run on a table outside the body.
Okay, wait. You just explained that a button battery is actively creating lye and liquefying the patient's throat.
I did.
The clock is ticking, tissue is dying.
Mhm.
Are you telling me the doctor is going to stand at a side table, practicing grabbing a spare battery with a pair of forceps?
Yep.
How does that make any logical sense in an emergency?
I know, it sounds counterintuitive, but it is the essence of crisis management. Time spent failing inside the body is far more dangerous than time spent preparing outside the body.
Okay.
Think about it. If a doctor goes in with a non-serrated short jaw forceps, reaches the battery, and then spends 10 minutes trying and failing to get a secure grip because the tool keeps slipping off the smooth metal,
Oh, I see.
yeah, they have just subjected the patient to extended trauma, increased the risk of pushing the battery deeper, and wasted precious time.
So a 10-second practice run on the back table guarantees the tool actually works on that specific material.
Exactly. It provides absolute confirmation of the mechanical grip. And it's worth noting, the rat tooth isn't the only option, depending on the geometry of the object.
Right.
The source mentions that if they are removing something tubular, like a medical stent that has migrated, they might deploy a snare instead.
A snare, meaning like a wire loop.
Exactly. A flexible wire loop that pushes out of the scope, opens up like a lasso, drops over the object, and cinches tight. It provides a full 360-degree grip.
Oh, that's clever. The point is, matching the physical properties of the tool to the physical properties of the object, whether that's a snare for a tube or a serrated rat tooth for a coin, it must be verified before entering the patient. Okay, so we have our tool, we've verified the grip, the heist is officially on, we move into the actual extraction process inside the body, and the stakes here are astronomically high. Getting a grip on the object is really only the beginning of the battle.
Right, because retrieving the object means pulling it against gravity, up a muscular tube, past several very delicate biological structures.
And the source identifies the absolute #1 danger during this pull: dropping the foreign body into the airway.
The human digestive tract and the respiratory tract share incredibly close real estate in the back of the throat. The esophagus sits directly behind the trachea or the windpipe.
Too close for comfort, really.
Way too close. As you pull a heavy object like a coin up the esophagus, if your forceps slip and you lose your grip right at the top of the throat, that object can easily fall forward.
Oh.
Yeah, it drops past the vocal cords and straight into the trachea. You have instantly converted a complex gastroenterology problem into a catastrophic respiratory obstruction. The patient can no longer breathe.
That is a terrifying margin of error. And if dropping it is the first danger, the second danger is almost as visceral, causing a mucosal laceration, basically tearing the delicate lining of the throat as the object is dragged up.
Because the esophagus is not some hollow, rigid PVC pipe. It is a collapsed muscular tube that actively hugs whatever is inside it.
The video actually points out specific anatomical danger zones where these tears are most likely to happen. It calls out the GE junction and the cricopharyngeus muscle.
Right. So the GE junction, the gastroesophageal junction, is the tight muscular ring where the esophagus meets the stomach. And the cricopharyngeus muscle is the upper esophageal sphincter at the top of the throat.
So they're pinch points.
Exactly. These are natural physiological choke points where the space physically narrows.
Let's apply this to the open safety pin we talked about earlier. If a patient swallowed an open safety pin and the doctor grabs the hinged end, the sharp point is trailing behind. How do they pull an open needle up a collapsed muscular tube through those tight choke points without just slicing the entire esophagus open from the inside?
It requires an exquisite understanding of spatial awareness and physics. The doctor cannot just pull blindly. They have to use the endoscope to gently push the esophageal walls away, inflating the tube slightly with air.
Inflating it, okay.
Yeah, and then they must perfectly center the forceps, maneuvering the object so that the trailing sharp point is shielded.
Shielded how?
Sometimes they pull the object partially into the protective plastic hood at the end of the endoscope, but if that isn't possible, they have to physically torque the forceps, angling the safety pin so the sharp point stays dead center in the lumen.
So it's not touching the sides.
Exactly, dragging harmlessly through the open space rather than catching on the mucosal folds. They inch it upward, constantly adjusting the angle as they navigate past the GE junction and approach that upper sphincter. It is an excruciatingly slow, deliberate mechanical dance.
Which brings us to the final, and frankly, the most mind-bending hurdle of this entire procedure. You have successfully navigated the safety pin up the esophagus. You haven't dropped it into the lungs. You haven't sliced the choke points. You are at the very top of the throat.
Right.
But the hardest part is actually the exit strategy.
Because you suddenly have to contend with the rigid geometry of the human head.
Yeah, the anatomical challenge at the top of the throat is just wild. The path from the pharynx, the back of the throat into the mouth, is essentially a 90-degree turn.
And we are dealing with rigid, linear tools here. Endoscopes are somewhat flexible, but the forceps and the metal object you are gripping are rigid. Mechanically pulling a long, rigid object around a sharp right angle without digging the ends of that object into the surrounding tissue is virtually impossible.
It's the classic moving a sofa dilemma,
Oh,
right?
perfect, yes.
You have a long, stiff couch and a tight right-angle corner in a narrow hallway. You push, you pivot, the corner of the couch scrapes the paint off the wall, it gets wedged. It's a geometrical nightmare. But inside a throat, scraping the paint means lacerating vital tissue. So how on earth does the doctor get a 6-centimeter piece of rigid metal around a 90-degree corner?
They don't.
They don't.
The doctor operating the forceps is physically incapable of solving this geometric problem alone from the inside. This is where the procedure becomes a deeply collaborative physical effort.
Ah. The source states it requires an assistant, a nurse, or an anesthetist to manually manipulate the patient's head and neck from the outside.
Yes, the assistant has to execute a specific external maneuver. They place their hands on the patient and perform a jaw thrust while extending the patient's neck backward.
So they're physically grabbing the jaw, pushing it forward, and tilting the entire head back. What does that actually do to the internal anatomy?
It alters the biomechanics of the upper airway and digestive tract. By pushing the jaw forward and extending the neck, the assistant literally changes the internal geometry. They take that dangerous 90-degree right angle and pull the tissues until they form a relatively straight line.
Wow.
They align the axis of the mouth with the axis of the throat.
So they are essentially knocking down the walls of the hallway so the sofa can just slide straight out.
Precisely. It turns a severe anatomical corner into a safe, straight exit ramp. The doctor, operating the delicate tools inside, is completely dependent on the assistant physically remodeling the patient's anatomy from the outside.
That's amazing.
Without that jaw thrust, the rigid object would invariably tear the back of the throat on its way out.
That level of physical coordination is incredible. The success of the highly technical internal extraction literally hinges on the brute force, external manipulation of the patient's biomechanics by a team member.
It perfectly illustrates that emergency medicine is never a solo endeavor. It's an intricate intersection of physics, anatomy, and teamwork.
It really is a masterclass in high-stakes problem solving. When we pull all of this together, the sheer precision required is astounding. We start with the strict triage thresholds, knowing the 6-centimeter anatomical limits of the duodenum, or understanding the devastating alkaline chemistry of a button battery resting on a mucosal wall.
We move to the calculated physics of tool selection, rejecting the biopsy cups because they can't grip a smooth surface, and opting for a 10-second practice run with a serrated rat tooth forceps to guarantee mechanical success.
And finally, the delicate, perilous extraction. Shielding sharp edges, inflating the muscular tube to avoid lacerations, entirely avoiding the trachea, and relying on a coordinated jaw thrust just to temporarily change the geometric angles of the human skull for a safe exit. It is a massive, highly engineered effort. I think the next time you safely swallow a bite of food or just take a sip of water, you really need to appreciate the complex plumbing that makes that simple act possible.
The complexity of that plumbing is exactly what I want to leave you thinking about today.
Oh, where does this lead us?
Well, our entire exploration today, and the source material itself, has focused heavily on the mechanical extraction of objects already trapped inside the body. It is a brilliant, reactive science. But consider the underlying root cause of these emergencies. Consider the evolutionary design of the human throat itself.
The geography of it, you mean?
Yes. The airway and the esophagus share the exact same tight, congested space, separated only by a tiny flap of tissue. And as we just discussed with the jaw thrust, getting anything in or out requires navigating a massive 90-degree anatomical turn. It is a severe geographical bottleneck.
It's an incredibly precarious setup for a species that, needs to eat every single day.
Which leaves us with a fascinating question to mull over. When we look at emergency rooms constantly dealing with these swallowed object crises, are we simply witnessing a failure of human judgment people making terrible choices about what they put in their mouths? Or, given the perilous proximity of our windpipe to our stomach and the sharp right angles built into our skulls, Are we actually dealing with a fundamental catastrophic design flaw in our own evolutionary biology?
That is a profound question to end on. Because whether it is our own poor choices or a flaw in our biological blueprint, we can at least be grateful that medical teams are standing by, armed with rat-tooth forceps, ready to go in and fix the plumbing.